it is time for the final talk of the day. And for that, we have Trevor Cleveland, who has flown in all the way from San Diego. He is San Diego born and raised. Shockingly, he is a surfer from San Diego, who knew? Currently a product designer at Instagram, but he's worked at a whole bunch of different places, Netflix, Twitter, CNN. And this is maybe a bit of a distillation of the journey that Trevor has gone on. And I'd like you to make him very welcome. Please give a big welcome to Trevor Cleveland.
Wow. Hey, everyone. Really stoked to be here today. It's been such a fun conference, and I feel like it's really cool to see how a lot of these talks have kind of converged on a lot of similar themes. Today, I kind of want to talk to you about how we all have unique stories and perspectives, and how if we lean into these things, they can make us better creatives and designers and developers, researchers, whoever you are in this audience. But before I dive into that, I wanted to share a little bit about myself. I am a product designer currently at Instagram. I'm a part of a labs team called the Communities Labs team. And it's kind of a dull name, but we get to work on some really interesting stuff. Particularly, we get to work on creating some brand new 0-1 experiences for young people, and particularly teens. So another way I like to look at the work I get to do is how can I help shift a firmly established product like Instagram into some bold and new directions. But one of the things I wanted to share a little bit is speaking at a conference has been a goal of mine for a while. I have to admit, I'm a bit of an introvert, and kind of getting on a stage in front of you is all like, it takes a lot for me. But I wanted to challenge myself and do something that's a little uncomfortable. So yeah, I've also been developing the idea of this talk for about 6 years, ever since I left a really comfortable job in the Bay Area in the pursuit of my own kind of mental health. So I feel like I just need to get this out of my system before I can move on to anything else. So I'm happy to share those thoughts today. And one of the things I wanted to say is I'm really stoked that this conference is here in Edinburgh. I have a really soft spot for the city. The last time I got to be here, I was 21, about 15 years ago. I just graduated university, and my friends and I were kind of traveling the world, or traveling the country. And my wife and I were going to come back in 2020, and you know how that year went. My trip got canceled. I'm sure some of you can empathize with that. But the first trip, though, was a pretty fun adventure. I had all these really funny stories documented, and especially when I was in Edinburgh, we were staying in a hostel just off of the Royal Mile and kind of got into some wild things. And I wanted to read to you from some of my journals to kind of have an icebreaker, but sadly, they're in storage. My wife and I are remodeling our house right now, and I was digging around half a day trying to find them, and so I get this slide of photos instead. But yeah, oh wow, that's supposed to be just on one line, but whatever. So, big theme for the next couple days, understanding. A lot of great talks already about how we can understand the people we design for to build better products. I wanted to take a bit of a more personal approach and talk about how we can understand ourselves. Side note, isn't it one of the things I like about putting decks together is just how can I put the funnest GIFs on a single screen? But I wanted to share with you kind of my own personal journey through my life and my career, and really what motivates me. Over the years, I've made countless decisions around advancing my own career or pursuing my own personal happiness. I've experienced seasons of tremendous growth, but I've also had seasons where I've ignored my own mental health at the cost of in the pursuit of achieving those goals. I've burnt out. I've experienced extreme apathy. But I've also experienced some tremendous success, and I feel like it's been this journey of trial and error as I've tried to find the balance between my professional and my personal life. And I don't think I'm quite there yet, but I've learned a lot along the way, and I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is that as a designer, for me, understanding myself has helped me to become a more empathetic and understanding designer. And by understanding who I am and what my needs are, I am more receptive to the needs of the people I design for. And now particularly like teens in my case. So this understanding has freed me creatively, and I feel like it can do the same for you. So in this talk, I want to touch on 3 big themes. First, I want to talk about the importance of embracing our unique qualities in front of and away from our offices. Secondly, how we're going to go through seasons of life, and it's important to set goals for ourselves to help kind of get us through and see the other side. And lastly, I think it's kind of cool to just not only embrace our creativeness, but the journey that we've taken to get there. I think this self-awareness helps us design better for others, and even those who are vastly different from us. So being true to yourself and your individual perspective can bring an authentic and fresh approach to your work. I know that sentence has a lot of buzzwords in it, but I wrote it and I kind of believe in it, so it stayed in. Your personal experiences and values and passions can help enrich your ideas in a way that can help you become a more intuitive designer or creative, and can help you create products that truly resonate with your audience. In my case, there are things that are kind of core to who I am as a person. They're unique to me, and they shape my worldview. Something about me that I thought was odd for a while is I don't really identify as a designer. If I were to summarize myself in a few words, it would be father, husband, surfer, maybe curious. I just happen to design for a living. And I think it's one of those professions as creatives that it keeps our mind stimulated. But there are always things that I needed outside of the office before I could kind of approach my work in any effective ways. So in this section, I kind of want to talk about those things and how they've kind of helped influence and shape the direction of my career. So first, I am a complete ocean person. I grew up surfing, obviously from San Diego, but it's just been ingrained with what my family always did. My dad grew up surfing and is pretty respected in the industry. I'm a 5-minute walk from the ocean today, and getting in the ocean, surfing is just part of my routine. I think we all have that thing in our lives where if we don't have it, we just kind of feel off, and surfing is my thing. This is kind of a funny example of how far that might go for me. Earlier in my career, when we used to have to relocate for career opportunities before the pandemic, that light's kind of there we go. I used to base all my career decisions on the proximity of a company to the ocean and the amount of commuting I'd be willing to handle back and forth to those things. So early on in my career, when a recruiter from Netflix first reached out to me, the very first thing I did was Google them and see where they were located. If they're in a place like Chicago or New York, which are really incredible cities, it would have been a non-starter for me. But they're in the city called Los Gatos, which is kind of South Bay area. They're a 45-minute commute from another town on the coast called Santa Cruz, which is, if you don't know about it, it's a really famous surf destination in California. So I thought I could make it work. And then the second thing I did was actually research the role and the company and see if it'd be a good fit for me. And as it turns out, it was exactly what I needed at that time. And I still think to this day that one decision I made was maybe the greatest decision I ever made in my career. And it's weird to think about that being so early on in my career, but as I was reflecting and kind of creating this talk, I realized it really fundamentally shifted the direction that not only my career went in, but also my life. So where I come from holds a significant importance to me. I'm kind of this San Diegan surfer person deep down. I think if you've ever found your place, it's really hard to quantify why. I just happened to find mine kind of early on. It's this particular part of California, culture, that's really hard to repeat, and it's just kind of comforting to me. And for me, it took moving away to fully realize how much I actually needed it. So when I was at Netflix, and after I relocated, I was deeply satisfied with my work. I felt just like it was the right fit there. However, living in Santa Cruz, even though on paper it had kind of all those things, it was really hard for me to make my fit. For the first couple of years, it was really hard to make friends. I was kind of lonely and depressed. And gradually, after time, I had a small group of friends that I could really lean on. But I always kept feeling like I just missed home, and eventually I wanted to move back. And one of the things that kept me there for so long was again, at Netflix, I really love my work. And on top of that, it was kind of the first time in my life that I actually felt like I could save for my future. So security is also kind of important there. But eventually things got to a point where no salary or opportunity that Netflix or living in the Bay Area could provide for me, that was more important than kind of my own mental health. So I moved back home. Also, now I'm married. I have a couple small kids. Family is pretty much the most important thing in my life. And it goes into kind of all my big decision making. So when looking at career opportunities, I ask myself a few questions. One, will this help provide, or will this help me achieve my own goals? Will this help provide for my family in significant ways? And then how much am I willing to trade off between those two things in terms of kind of being away from my family? And as it turns out, currently, I'm not willing to sacrifice much. Today I work till about 5 or 5:15 and I'm done. And missing things like dinner, and bedtimes, and little moments to kind of connect with my wife with all the chaos going on are just kind of non-negotiables right now. Plus, I've been working remotely since about 2018, and I know, everyone's needs are different, but for me, working remote, I'm much more effective and productive in my job than I've ever been career-wise. So I feel like there's no opportunity or water cooler conversation that working in an office can provide for me. Plus, I'm much healthier not having to spend a significant portion of my life in a car, in traffic, going to work and back and all that. I'm also naturally really curious. Man, I wish those lined up. Anyways, I'm naturally really curious. And if I'm not listening to music at work, I probably have a podcast or YouTube video on something about science or philosophy or religion, or sometimes I just go on weird deep dives where if I see some weird opinions, I want to learn all about that, and I'll go on a weird bender. But this curiosity kind of carries over into how I approach my design work. I have a background more in visual design, and so I'm naturally kind of more of a tinkerer. I love making things function incredibly well, but also look amazing at the same time. And I think that the best work requires a lot of tinkering and abandoning ideas to get to a better place. The best products shipped, I feel are vastly different than the original ideas that kind of sparked them. And for me at work, I need an environment where I can explore these things, or I can get bored really fast. So these things are really integral to me. They're pretty core to who I am. They keep me pretty sane and functional. And when I have these needs met first, I'm able to do my best work. And I realize that everyone's needs are different, and your needs are probably very different from mine. That's not really the point. It's to take the time to figure out what those things are and to embrace them. And once those are satisfied, we can see how we can start excelling in other places. This helps us balance out our lives. And when we find that balance, there's a shift in our mindset and approach when we bring that into the office. So be intentional and give a damn about what makes you tick. Now that I've contextualized my own life a little bit, I wanted to talk about how we're all going to kind of go through different periods of life where we might need to focus on our professional or our personal needs. Recognizing and setting goals will be super helpful in getting us through the other end. I like to think of life as not being this linear line that's always going up and to the right. I feel like this is kind of a lie that kind of pressurizes us to always perform. I feel like it's kind of more of this beautiful jumbled ball of yarn that kind of weaves in and out, and you just kind of have to take it as it comes. But also, like, being intentional about seasons that we're in is super helpful. And obviously, we need to grow professionally to actually be good at what we do. So we might need to learn new skills or get a product launch just right, or even that like a career change is necessary. And recognizing that we're in a growth season can lead to rapid progress and new additions to our tool belts. And to ensure that this growth is healthy, a purposeful approach will help get us through the other side. Early in my career, I went through a lot of rapid progress after joining Netflix. Before then, I was working for a couple smaller agencies, and I had limited experience in using data to validate my work. My own design process relied heavily on my own intuition. I would pitch ideas to clients, and I'd make the best out of a chosen direction without much research. So I knew I needed to learn more about data and testing to remain relevant. So when I joined Netflix, I kind of devoted myself to learning these new tools. And then I felt like I could bring my own visual and conceptual strengths into this environment where data, testing, and really kind of like that idea of practicing the scientific method flattened out everyone's opinions in the room. And for me at the time, maybe being from agency life was very liberating. I was a part of the TV design team. And one of the things that I really loved about designing for television is, on one hand, they're pretty central to our homes for entertainment, whether you like it or not. And on the other hand, they're really, really cumbersome to use. They're way less intuitive than desktop or mobile phones. And depending on the type of hardware that you're on, you can have a really varying level of performance. And through all those constraints, it's really, really hard to make something seem simple to use. And in that environment, we were able to create the Netflix TV UI that exists today. And there have been a lot of great changes over the years, but that core UI and concept is what my team helped develop. And we were able to do this by challenging what worked in the past with a really simple question. Can we use interesting moments from content to sell it differently to different people? Could Top Gun be positioned as a love story to one person and a dogfighting action movie to another? And that one question led us to pursue a more cinematic approach to design. The whole idea of actually letting the content sell itself. And through all the variant testing, research, and abandoning wholesale ideas, I learned how to design for a diverse set of people with different needs and experiences. See, I told you. My experience at Netflix, it all started because I took a leap and said yes to something that that was a bit out of my comfort zone. And I feel like being open and having an opportunistic mind can open doors that didn't previously exist. For example, if you're not feeling very satisfied, you're not quite sure where your career is heading, just the simple idea of keeping our portfolios up to date can create opportunities. However, in our careers, I think it's important for us to check in with ourselves and make sure that our growth is kind of happening in a healthy way, or we can fall into traps where we push ourselves to unhealthy limits. This is how we burn out, right? I think on top of that, if we focus solely on our career growth in unhealthy ways, we can become potentially bad partners. I think we've all heard somebody at one point say, I've said it myself, and we've probably been told it, something like, yeah, we tried that idea and it just didn't work. And that kind of sentiment can be really deflating when your colleague or yourself is trying to maybe recontextualize an idea that wasn't explored in a particular way. And I think we all want to be good partners. So if you find yourself thinking like this, like I have before, it's important for us to kind of check in and make sure that we're being good partners, because I think our own mental health means that we're there for our teams in positive ways. I think, just kind of based on what I'm talking about, you already know that I firmly believe that it's pretty important for us to take breaks from work and cultivate our passions outside of the office. And regardless of what it is, stepping away from work and focusing on something can keep our minds fresh and stretch our brains in good ways. So for me personally, like when I moved back to San Diego, like I was talking about, it was this purposeful shift from focusing on my career to my family and my own kind of personal happiness. Today it's not so binary, but before the pandemic, relocating somewhere else, especially if you're moving away from certain hubs like the Bay Area for me, or I guess here would London would probably be the equivalent. It meant, giving up certain opportunities and potentially kind of big opportunities. But at the time, it was way more important for me to kind of make a priority out of focusing on how I can increase my own personal happiness. How do I be better connected to my wife? Where are some fun places to travel? How do I maximize my time in the ocean? And it was a really, really fun part of my life. And it was pivotal in reshifting my priorities in really positive ways. However, life does kind of require us to prioritize certain aspects over another. There will be seasons where it naturally gets way too overwhelming, and the important thing is to try to be aware and somewhat, hopefully, in control of when it happens, so we can kind of have plans. For me, I don't know if this GIF is like funnier being in the UK, but I've always loved Mr. Bean. The way I try to keep everything balanced is by being a little selfish, and I just wanted to say that that's totally okay. My personal life is pretty crazy right now. I'm taking on a lot outside of what I'm normally used to. I'm kind of stretching myself. And the way that I create space is typically right now my hard working hours are 9 to 5. And I'm pretty done. I used to have like some pretty bad habits when I was younger, where if I wasn't feeling particularly inspired in a day, I would just make up work later that night or on the weekends. But now it's way more important for me to be a present father than miss things like, bedtimes and push work way into the night. So that's my time, and I'm pretty selfish about it. But here's what it has taught me. By time boxing my days at work, it's forced me to be really efficient with my time and not dragging my feet knowing that I could just make it up later. It's helped me become more focused and better at communicating. And I have to be there for my team and effective at my job. I can't just be like messing around. And growth can also come in the form, of decisions we make. Ultimately, there's always some risk involved with the decisions that we make. Sometimes these risks can lead to great success, but other times they might not pan out as we expected. When I was talking about joining Netflix was a calculated risk, and it really kind of paid off for me. But in my recent career moves, it's been a series of trying to find that right fit again. I kind of wanted to share a couple examples of that. So when I moved home, I spent a quick year at GoPro, and their software design or development team was down in San Diego, so I was focusing on creating new experiences for the mobile app. My nuclear team was pretty amazing, and I'm still really close with them today, but after internally, things weren't so great. And after surviving around the layoffs there and kind of feeling the burnout that seemed to affect everyone else around me, I decided to move on. I joined Roku, where I started to find my fit again. I felt like I could take a lot of my streaming learnings from Netflix and apply it to a new space where they also focused on hardware. I was getting to lead a small mobile design team on kind of completely transforming the app from something that was built by a bunch of people who were focused primarily on television to something that was much more of a great utility and streaming experience for people who wanted to use their phones. I felt like we had a really strong use case to investing further in mobile, and at the time, they didn't. And it led to a season that led my entire team feeling pretty spread thin, and I ultimately decided to move on there too. I most recently joined Instagram for 3 pretty big reasons. One, I love the product and I use it every day. I felt like I could still learn there and grow, but also contribute to the team that I was a part of. And lastly, stability was kind of important to me at the time. Like, I had a couple opportunities to join some startups, but my wife and I were heading into this crazy remodel, and the idea of having a stable income sounded nice. So on one hand, I feel like I really did find my fit again. You know, I love my team. I love the problem space that I get to be challenged in every day. But on the other hand, it's been a real trial. And in the past 6 months, you know, I've survived 2 rounds of layoffs, and I was developing this talk, like not knowing if I'd have a job talking to all of you. And I was like ready to shift particular areas, which is kind of funny. But I'm at a point, I'm coming out of that season, just wanting to not worry about if I'm going to be employed and just focus on building great experiences for my audience again. So yeah, finding the right fit can be hard, but it is important to educate yourself as much as you can and approach the ups and downs as learning opportunities. Remember, our journey and finding balance looks differently for everyone. So hopefully you can take the time to figure out what that is for you. So this is where I kind of hard pivot, but when we embrace our needs and kind of navigate our careers, I think it's kind of fun to just take a step back and think how fun it is that we get to do what we do. I don't think a lot of us in this room don't just fall into this profession. We're here because we like to solve problems and pair that with really great solutions. I feel like coming up with truly great experiences does require us to go beyond this idea of the scientific method within our organizations. We do need to embrace our creativity and be the spearhead of driving new ideas. A lot of us are part of organizations that have already found product market fit. So our roles are really to figure out how we can evolve those products and make them better over time. But a platform can really only stand so much weight before a palate cleanser is necessary, and you need to shift to remain relevant. So innovation sometimes calls for us going beyond just our incremental changes and taking all of our learnings and develop new paradigms. A lot of companies have scaled so rapidly, and they employ, and maybe this is from my perspective, but employ thousands of designers and researchers and engineers. And as a result, with this growth, I feel like teams have become increasingly siloed. This approach, you know, is super effective to capitalize on initial success, but eventually, it could be years or maybe decades out, it can slow innovation. You know, what they've done is they've really turned their products into assembly lines. And that is hyper effective, but sometimes new assembly lines need to get made, or these companies can get passed up. I also kind of see this in the term product designer. You know, that's like my title. That's kind of big industry shift lately. And on one side, I really love this term because I don't really identify as just a visual designer. If that's all I had to do every day is kind of make other people's concepts or just like push pixels around, I'd get kind of bored in my job. But this term also implies that everyone is expected to operate in the same way. And we all have different talents that might not get recognized when we're all kind of placed under the same role. I do think in some ways this is unfortunate in how we train up and coming designers. We do teach them to be problem solvers within tight constraints. And I think a lot of UX courses that I've seen, you know, they teach a broad understanding of the design process. And so when we get to that capital D part of design, portfolios often have an emphasis on something very, very narrow. So how can we train our designers to be better conceptual thinkers? I think it's actually really difficult in an organization to take a step back and say, hey, I don't think this is really working anymore. We need to take what works well and shift into a fundamentally new direction. And I think this is rightfully so. You're going to get a lot of pushback, and you need to prove your case, which requires a lot of work and convincing. This is where, though, I think we as creatives can really excel in our jobs and provide value. But that does require time and space to create for ourselves, to dive into data, actually wrestle with ideas. And that's really, really hard. And I do kind of believe that's where design is a bit of an art. Notice I'm not saying design is art, because wherever you fall in that debate, I think it's a little more nuanced than that. And I'm sorry I'm going here, but I have a bit of an axe to grind for a second. And I'm gonna get probably a little hyperbolic, but I think there's like a narrative in the design community circulating that says something like, art asks questions and design answers them. And I'm not sure like where this originated, but I kind of wanted to get on stage and challenge that a little bit. Like, what does that even mean? I feel like if you said that to an artist, they'd probably say to you in like not so nice terms, like, don't tell me what art is. This is where I get really hyperbolic. Like, what question is this asking? And like, is that the most important thing? Or is it kind of cool to just like look at this and take it in as like this really weird, cool piece of art? Do we form our own questions from this? Like questions that the artist didn't even intend? Is that okay? Does this even ask questions to a general audience? When does this cross over to design? And is it still art? And then we put a UI up after all these like really cool creations that people have made over the years. And I think we all get a little uncomfortable. You know, I think as creatives, we don't want to equate what we do to like all these great pieces of art that have been created over the years. But I do feel like a lot of the same processes go into making some of these things. And to me, like, because of that, like, it's all art and it's all design in some weird way. So, yeah, like, why do we have to put these in their own separate categories? What? My slides have disappeared. Interesting. So anyways, this is where I talk about, I feel like, you know, design and art are creative pursuits in their own right. There we go. And wait, let me go back. So sorry. Okay, I think I'm just breaking the system now. So rant over. One last thing I did want to say about it is I do think, you know, we're often quick to equate design as more of a science. One of the things I think is kind of cool about science is like some of the biggest breakthroughs that have ever been made has required people to look at data, find gaps in our knowledge, and come up with wildly creative solutions that need to be tested and proven out. I think ideas that are common knowledge today were radical at the time. I know it's kind of a funny example because it's so common, but you know, the idea that the Earth revolves around the sun was like revolutionary at its time. And it was like the first time in human history that we were able to recontextualize the Earth as being on the same plane or same level as these things that we were observing in the sky, the planets. So I feel like science and art are often described as, you know, human, or it's said that science and art are described as human attempts to describe the world around us. I feel like design falls in that same category because it involves creative problem solving in abstract and giving meaning to abstract ideas. So the main point of my talk boils down to this. You are a creative person. You have a unique worldview and problem-solving approach. There's only one you, and you do have value. Embracing this and recognizing that everyone's needs are different can lead to building great products that benefit everyone. While success is ultimately guided by how a product performs, having a vision of where to go next and executing on that vision is what propels businesses forward. And I think this needs a deep amount of empathy that only comes from understanding yourself well enough to understand that everyone else is the same way, and maybe a bit of creativity. So as for myself, I'm at a really interesting point in my career. I've had my ups and downs. I've really learned what makes me tick. I know what my non-negotiables are. And now I'm at Instagram. I'm getting to lead design for a labs team that's purely focused on teens, while the rest of the company is trying to shift to capture more teens. Like, we're purely dedicated to it. And that's like teens. I'm 36 years old now, and I don't really feel it, but I'm technically middle-aged. If I were to create experiences for myself or my demographic, I'd be a complete failure at what I do. My cultural references, I did this run-through with my team, and they're like, teens don't even understand that GIF anymore. But my references and values and my expectations, they're really different from my users. So by taking the time to actually empathize with them, I can create designs that meet their needs regardless of my own background. And this requires me to remove myself from the situation and just dive into research and stay up to date with trends, technologies. And then I can propose ideas that I myself might not be comfortable with, but my confidence in understanding my users is driving my solutions. And it's completely unselfish, and ultimately designing with empathy for my users can lead to better designs for them. And there's tons of data that says when we design for specific audiences in mind, we tend to create better products for everyone. And this starts with not projecting our own biases and beliefs and values onto others, but approaching people and situations with an open mind. Ultimately, empathy requires a level of emotional intelligence and self-awareness. Understanding yourself and your life journey can help you develop these qualities to become a more effective, creative person, human, friend. So yeah, I hope my ramblings have been useful in some way. And my story is just one of many. I hope in some way hearing about my journey would inspire some of you to embrace your own uniqueness, to become more thoughtful and inclusive creatives. We have our own stories shaped by a lifetime of life, and I think that uniqueness has value. And by tapping into that and really understanding what that means, we can become the best versions of ourselves and better creatives. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that, Trevor. Really appreciate it. Right. On the point of, we are all unique. We all have something we can bring. What if the thing that makes you unique is that you're an insufferable asshole? And you have the self-awareness to know it. What does that bring to the table?
Is that a quality to really aspire to?
No, not aspire, but let's say you do. Let's say you realize, like, actually, I don't work well with others. I understand what makes me unique is that I'm abrasive and don't play well. Doesn't necessarily bring something to the table.
I think whatever qualities we have, there are positives and negatives to that. I think abrasive people can potentially have really strong opinions and ideas, and maybe they deserve to be heard. But I think, we all are in environments where we have to work with other people and figure out how to navigate that. And if you are a little more abrasive, I'm kind of an agreeable person, but yeah, figuring out how to navigate that will help for sure.
Yeah. Any questions for Trevor? Let me get a feel for how many hands we got. There's one way at the back there. Let's get a microphone over there.
Yeah, as a designer, your sense of self can be so caught up in your job. How important do you think it is? And that can lead to burnout, because obviously you can go on Instagram and you can see that people are posting a lot of things, and you might feel guilty because you've been working all day. You don't necessarily feel like doing your own thing. You maybe not as enthusiastic as you were when you were going through your education, where you were producing a lot of stuff. How important do you think it is to have sort of personal time for sort of personal work, and how do you sort of deal with that, your job being so caught up within your own sense of self and identity?
Yeah, that's the challenge, and earlier in my career, like my identity was really wrapped into like my career and everything, and for me, that led to some really like unhealthy seasons. Now, I approach it a bit more as like a job and a job that like I love to do. So for me, that's kind of like where I find the balance. But, design might be like your thing, and rightfully so. I mean, like, it's really fun to like just kind of create things for the sake of making them. So I don't know if like it's hard to find that balance, but taking the time to like kind of figuring it out and being okay with like you might be different from your colleagues, and being okay with that is fine. And hopefully we're in spaces where we can all kind of embrace that a little more.
And I think it's totally fine to treat work as it's a transactional thing. And you were having to almost, you were describing it as selfish when you talked about having boundaries. That now you work from 9 to 5, you set the boundaries, and you were talking in terms of being selfish. That's not selfish. That's perfectly reasonable, right?
I know, right? But like sometimes there's expectations, and a lot of us are part of distributed teams, and sometimes that idea of like when people are working is really kind of vague now. And for me, that also just kind of relates to how I operated when I was younger and was just like kind of available on the clock at all times. But that's what led to me kind of burning out a lot.
Yeah, I kind of want to pick up on something I was asking Philip earlier about those three things he mentioned: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I was kind of saying, maybe is it okay if work gives you 2 out of the 3? And it sounds to me like maybe that's what you're getting at these days: is you get to do the mastery, you get to do the autonomy, but maybe your purpose comes from family, the ocean. Not necessarily. Work doesn't have to provide all of it. Was that fair?
I think it's completely fair.
Do you feel heretical saying that out loud sometimes, because the pressure is that like you must find your purpose in?
Yeah, I mean, no. I used to, but I got to a place where I'm just like, these are my needs. This is what I need to have satisfied, and I'm okay with not being like a designer's designer, or feeling like that needs to be what I project out. Yeah.
And let me say, speaking as someone who's seen many more seasons than you're awfully young to be talking about seasons of life. I'm guessing you're going to have many more to come.
Yeah, I mean, like my kids are only like 2 and 1, so it's going to be a lot. But
yeah, you're going to have a whole lot more seasons. Anyway, thank you so much, Trevor. Really appreciate it. All right.